The decade I chose was the 1920s. My subtopic was music and the important people that, played music in the 1920s. Willie the Lion Smith was one of those people, one of those important people that, did the jazz thing in the 1920s. He was born on November the 23rd, 1893, and he died April the 18th of 1973. He was an American jazz pianist. He was considered one of the big three of stride piano, along with James P. Johnson and Fats Waller. And even though he did not make any recordings till the mid-30s, he was still up there with them. His mother was an organist and a pianist. Smith started playing piano at the age of 6. He earned a living playing piano as a teenager. He served in World War I, and his heroism in World War I gained him his nickname, The Lion. So that's where The Lion comes from. Although he toured with Mamie Smith, he did his own thing. He freelanced a lot of his works and stuff like that. He made some albums with other singers, but he mostly just kind of went with the flow and he just did his own thing. He was an influence on the young Duke of Ellington for quite a few decades. Willie the Lion Smith was considered a living link to the glory days of early jazz. Some of his albums were Pork and Beans. Willie the Lion Smith and Don Ewell, did the stride piano duets, and then Willie the Lion Smith made the album Echoes of Spring. Louis Armstrong was the second important person that I chose to let you guys learn about in the 1920s with music. He was most important and influential musician in jazz history. He was one of the leading singers and entertainers from 1920s to the 1950s. He was born on August the 4th of 1901 and died on July 6th, 1971. He was great at playing the trumpet, and his music career began in the 1920s, made with his Hot 5 and Hot 7 ensembles, charted future for jazz. He had a hard childhood. His father worked in a factory. I think his father's name was William Armstrong, and his father worked in a factory, and soon after Louis was born, he left. He abandoned his family. He just left his entire family and didn't want nothing to do with them. Just walked out. So that left Louis's mother and maternal grandmother to, raise him. He showed an early interest in music when he was younger. And a junk dealer for whom he worked for as a grade school student helped him buy a cornet, and Louis taught himself how to play it. He dropped out of school at the age of 11 to join an informal group, but on December the 31st of 1912, he fired a gun during a New Year's Eve celebration, and then he was sent to reform school after that. He continued to play music there. He studied it a whole lot. He got to study music a whole lot more. And he played the cornet and bugle in the school band. Eventually becoming its leader. He became at that reform school, he became the school band's leader. He was released on June the 16th of 1914 and did manual labor while trying to, pursue his career as a musician. This is where Joe King Oliver comes in. He takes him under his wing and gives him a job, pretty much. He ends up, Joe moves to Chicago. Well, Oliver King moves to Chicago in 1918 and replaced Louis in the Kid O'Rye band. Armstrong moved to Chicago to join King's band in August 1922 and made his first recording as a member in 1923. He had 4 wives in his lifetime. So, yeah. And then we get to Oliver King. We get to King Oliver, Joe King Oliver, who was born on May the 11th of 1885, and then he passed away on April the 8th of 1938. He was the great New Orleans legends. An early giant legacy is only on records. He led one of the classic New Orleans jazz bands in 1923, which was the last significant group to emphasize collective improvisation over solos. He was originally a trombonist. By 1905, he was playing the cornet regularly with various New Orleans bands. Oliver gradually rose to the top of the crowded local scene in 1917. He was then billed King by band leader Kid Ora. King was a master of mutes. He was able to get out a wide variety of sounds out of his horn. So he had a pretty successful life for a little while, and then as years went on, he just kind of had some ups and downs, and eventually he, even though he had some really good albums that was stopped in 1931, he was becoming quickly forgotten by certain people. And then he had some unsuccessful tours in the South, which eventually left Oliver stranded there in the South as a manager of a pool hall before his death at age 52. And that's all I got.